There's a sign of Revelation 12 in the heavens on September 23rd, 2017. But what does it mean? The rapture, the rapture. No, sorry, no rapture. But I will tell you what will very likely happen. Hey, this is George Chong. To understand this sign, we need to know what is about to happen in 2017, according to my understanding of Bible prophecy. It's incredibly important, so please listen carefully. There is only one world-changing event happening in 2017, and if my Bible interpretation is correct, it should be 2017. If you watch my video on the 70 weeks of Daniel, you'll know there's a very mighty prophet who will appear according to Daniel 9:25. Well, actually, he's called the Anointed Prince, or the Anointed Leader. He's not Jesus. And according to Daniel's prophecy, this Anointed Prince appears in 2017, the same year as the Revelation 12 sign. It says in Daniel 9:25, "Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem, to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks, or 49 years. Now this prophecy can be when the Jews returned to Jerusalem or when the Jews started rebuilding Jerusalem. It's not clear. But the Jews returned to Jerusalem on June 7th, 1967, and they started rebuilding Jerusalem soon after that. But this is certain. According to this prophecy, an anointed leader will appear 49 years after the Jews return to Jerusalem. He should appear before 50 years and after 49 years. Because if it's after 50 years, God would have said after 50 years and not after 49 years. This lands us in 2017 for the deadline of his appearance. So who's this anointed prince that Daniel writes about? If you follow my teaching, you'll discover that he's the rider on the white horse in Revelation 6. He's the one who appears when Jesus Christ breaks the first seal in Revelation 6, and God gives him a crown, a victor's crown, and he goes out conquering and to conquer for Christ. So what does this soon appearing mighty prophet have to do with the Revelation 12 sign? Don't miss the connection. Listen to what God is hinting at. It's really good. It'll be so clear when the prophet manifests himself to the people. It's kind of like John. John was in the deserts until the day of his manifestation to Israel. So this prophet, he's waiting until the day of his manifestation to the people. He's waiting on God to give him the command to begin his end time work. Here's a quick summary of the Revelation 12 sign. Verse 1, "Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. This is Israel. When you read this, you should think of Joseph's dream. When Joseph was a young guy, he said to his brothers, "Hey guys, I had a dream. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed, your sheaf stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." Cool, huh? Then he had another dream, and this is the dream that is similar to the Revelation 12 sign. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bow down to me." Wow, gee, thanks, Joe. Great dream. Joseph, of course, being the 12th star. Verse 2, "Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born." This, of course, refers to Herod's plot to kill Jesus as soon as he was born. Apparently, it was satanically inspired. Satan wanted to kill Jesus as soon as he could, but couldn't. She bore a male child, that's Jesus, male child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and his throne. This is how Jesus left the earth. Jesus said, "But you shall receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you shall be witnesses to me in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." Now, when he had spoken these things, While they watched, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. So Jesus was taken up to heaven, and they were staring at the sky. Then two angels appeared and said, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand gazing up into heaven like idiots?" Well, he didn't say that exactly. It says, "And while they looked steadfastly toward heaven as he went up, behold, two men stood by them in white apparel, who also said, 'Men of Galilee, why do you stand gazing up into heaven? This same Jesus, who was taken up from you into heaven, will so come in like manner as you saw him go into heaven.'" Next verse, verse 6. "Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. This jumps to the Great Tribulation. Between verse 5 and verse 6 is where the church is born, and we have church history. In verse 5, Jesus went up, the child was caught up, and then after that, the church was born. Then, of course, the church ends with the rapture. After the rapture, God deals with Israel again. In verse 5, after Jesus went up, that's when God stopped dealing with Israel, and the church was born. In verse 6, the church is gone, and God is back dealing with Israel. So between verse 5 and 6, we have church history. Revelation 12 is about Israel and those that got left behind after the church was raptured. Revelation 12 is not about the church age. Now understand what God is saying to us, the church. Why did God put this sign in the sky for us, the church? God is essentially saying, hey, look, here's a sign of Christ being born on earth. I'm going to put the sign in the heavens for you. God is painting a picture for us. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Strangely, this picture that God painted is in the heavens on September 23rd, 2017. We see Virgo the Virgin. She's clothed with the sun, the moon is under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars, the constellation Leo, and the planets Mercury, Mars, and Venus, making 12 stars. The picture is there on September 23rd, 2017. Now on November 20th, 2016, Jupiter, the king planet, it enters the constellation Virgo, or you can say it enters the womb of Virgo, and it comes out or is birthed out 41 weeks later on September 9th, 2017. Then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. But the full picture with the stars, sun, and moon, it comes in on September 23rd, 2017. Now I can probably guarantee you that nothing will happen on that date. But God is simply giving us a picture reminding us of when Jesus was born. What's God trying to tell us? Well, later this year, a very mighty prophet is going to appear. God says, hey, look at this sign in the heavens. What does it remind you of? Reminds me of when Jesus was born. That's right, let me tell you, God will anoint this prophet with such power, it will be as if Jesus was back on earth. That's how powerful he will be. He's the only one in the scriptures we read about where God gives him a crown and he goes out conquering and to conquer in Revelation 6 when Jesus breaks the first seal. He's the end-time Elijah prophesied of in Malachi 4:5, who comes before, the key is before the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Behold, I send you Elijah the prophet, before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. He's the one who will turn the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse. God sends this guy so he doesn't have to smite the earth with a curse. That is complete destruction. He is the last stand. God is basically saying, I will wipe out the earth with a curse like in Noah's day, unless I send this guy to turn the tide of the battle. I'll send you Elijah the prophet, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse. Now don't think this is the Old Testament Elijah. Elijah the prophet is simply a nickname for the end-time prophet. He's the end-time Elijah forerunner of Christ's second coming. He's the one whom Christ said would restore all things. Jesus' disciples asked him, saying, why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? You see, the disciples had a dilemma. They knew that Elijah was to come before Christ. They're wondering, Jesus, you're already here, but where's Elijah? They didn't know there was two comings of Christ. No one knew, not even John the Baptist. So Jesus had to give two answers for their one question. Jesus answered and said to them, "Indeed, Elijah is coming first and will restore all things." That's the Elijah forerunner of his second coming. Jesus uses the future tense because it refers to the future. This isn't rocket science, but this doesn't click in some people's minds. I don't know why.
Future? What mean future? Jesus say will. Will mean happen already. He mean John the Baptist.
Who are these people? You might see some of their comments down below. I'm serious, you would think I was kidding, but these people exist. When Jesus said, Elijah is coming first and will restore all things in Matthew 17, John the Baptist was already dead. John had already been beheaded by Herod back in Matthew chapter 14. The same is true in the Gospels of Mark and Luke. Mark has John beheaded in Mark chapter 6. Then in Mark 9, we have Jesus transfigured on the mount, which is where the disciples ask Jesus about Elijah. In Luke's Gospel, we have Herod declaring in Luke 9:9, Herod said, "John I have beheaded, but who is this of whom I hear such things?" Then Jesus is later transfigured on the mount in Luke 9:29. So after John the Baptist was already dead, Jesus said Elijah is coming first and will restore all things. You can't get any clearer than that. Jesus then moves from the future event of Elijah coming to restore all things to his present situation. And Jesus says, "But I say to you that Elijah has come already," speaking of John the Baptist, "and they did not know him, but did to him whatever they wished. Likewise, the Son of Man is also about to suffer at their hands." Then the disciples understood that he spoke to them of John the Baptist. The disciples had one question. Jesus had to give two answers because there are two comings of Christ. John the Baptist didn't even know there was two comings of Messiah. And when John had heard in prison about the works of Christ, he sent two of his disciples and said to him, that's Jesus, "Are you the coming one, or do we look for another?" John heard what Jesus was doing, and John also baptized Jesus. John knew that Jesus was in fact the Messiah. John is basically telling Jesus, "Jesus, you are the Messiah. Come on, let's get the show rolling. Are you the Messiah, or do we look for another? I'm sitting here in prison, and I hear of all the works that you are doing. Come on, let's get rolling." Jesus sends back word to John. Jesus answered and said to them, "Go and tell John the things which you hear and see. The blind see and the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he who is not offended because of me." John was probably sitting in prison thinking, what in the world is going on? You see, John was living in the light of the Old Testament. No one living in the light of the Old Testament knew there were two comings of Christ. The disciples didn't even know that until way later. After Jesus had died and rose again, the disciples were still asking Jesus in Acts chapter 1. Therefore, when they had come together, they asked him, Jesus, saying, "Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? Are you gonna do it now, Lord?" And he said to them, "It is not for you to know times or seasons, which the Father has put in his own authority." And of course, they soon discovered Jesus is coming back. They just don't know when. So now you know there are two Elijah forerunners because there are two comings of Christ. But I still get a lot of messages like this one from a guy named Mark.
"Are you calling Jesus Christ a liar? You stupid, pathetic germ! Read your Bible, you F-something idiot! Jesus said this is Elijah. John the Baptist was Elijah. You F-something germ! Antichrist piece of something. Jesus Christ will soon crush your skull.
Now, Christian, beloved of the Lord, please understand, when this forerunner appears, Satan will have his servants out in full force to oppose this guy. Now, this guy Mark isn't exactly one of Satan's lieutenants. I pick on this guy Mark because he's like a cussing pirate, more like one of Satan's orcs. Orcs are easy to defeat and put down in spiritual battle, but Satan has guys much more cunning, crafty, and eloquent in speech. Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes. I liken them to trolls, goblins, and imps. Satan will let some hounds out to oppose this message. But when the end-time forerunner appears, Satan's gonna send in the big dogs. He's gonna gather his servants in full force to oppose this guy. I'll say it again. Satan will gather his forces to oppose this forerunner. He's a major threat to Satan's kingdom, just like John the Baptist was a serious threat. That's why the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes, the lawyers, they all came against John. Anyone Satan could get his hands on opposed John. And these same guys opposed Jesus. Although they all said, "Oh, we love God," very few of them truly loved God. And very few of them believed in John's message and believed in Jesus. So no, Christian, guys like Mark will go to church with you and they'll say things like, "Oh, isn't God good, brother? Isn't it good to serve the Lord?" But these are the tares in the field that Jesus warns you about. They grow up together with the wheat being the true believers. So what do we know when we see the Elijah forerunner? Number one, he is the sign of the coming Messiah. Why did John have to be rejected by the religious leaders, suffer, and be executed? Because Jesus would be rejected by the religious leaders. He would suffer. He would be executed. That's why Jesus says, "But I say to you that Elijah has come already, and they did not know him, but did to him whatever they wished. Likewise, the Son of Man is also about to suffer at their hands." It must happen the same way. Jesus is saying John is a sign of what's going to happen to me. Now do you understand the purpose of the Elijah forerunner? He's a glimpse of the coming Messiah. Jesus isn't coming back to suffer and be executed. Oh, no, no. Jesus is coming back on a white horse. So why is there a man coming on a white horse in Revelation 6? Who is he? He's the end-time Elijah forerunner. He's the sign of the coming Messiah. What's Messiah coming to do? You want to know what's Messiah coming to do? You better pay attention to what this forerunner does. And here's even better news. When you see this end-time Elijah forerunner, guess who's coming right behind him? And if you're not right with God, you'd better be afraid. It'll be like hot acid down the pants. So what's the conclusion? What's God telling us? When you see this prophet, it's going to be like the days when Jesus was born. Jesus is going to be working in this guy big time. Here's something else that's very interesting. In my last video titled Elijah Proclaims Judgment on America in 2017, I said Elijah should appear in 2017 and proclaim judgment on America based on a prophecy in Isaiah 28. Now I can't be certain on the date, but I do believe it should be 2017. Now look what also happens in 2017. On August 21st, there's an eclipse that cuts America in two, basically dividing it in half. That, I believe, is a prophetic sign of what God is about to do in America. And we'll soon find out if all this is true. George, but what if you're wrong? Well, if I'm wrong, I'd probably tell myself, "George, you're really bad at this Bible prophecy stuff." Then I'd probably unsubscribe from myself. I'd lose my very first subscriber. But if I was right, I'd be a super subscriber. I'd hit that subscribe button twice. Better yet, hit it 3 times. This is George Chuang teaching from China. Please subscribe and hit the like button. Also, you can like the Facebook page and follow along there. I'd really appreciate that. Oh, love you, Jesus. Yes. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.